Welcome to the Orion Center, Creation Expo. My name is David Batty. I'm the Assistant Director here, and first of all I want to thank you for taking your valuable time to go on this abbreviated tour with me today. And let's not waste any more time. Let's get to it.
Been doing this for quite a while now, about 12 years, and we began as mostly a creation science place where we compare and contrast creation and evolution. But it came to our realization that it's much more than science. It's all about the whole way that people look at life and the world around them. So we begin with a worldview room here that tries to explain how people think about things. We use a little triangle illustration here. The individual, there are three aspects to every individual: what they believe about God or don't believe about God. That leads to their ideas about science and nature, and finally that relates to what they believe about science, society and government and community. So all of those things conspire to make what we call a worldview, how you look at life. America was founded on very much a biblical creation idea. If you think about Thomas Jefferson, we have this famous quote: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights." Our rights come from God, so we have this idea of people who believe in a Creator God and believe in the Bible. Therefore, nature was created, and that our rights and responsibilities relate to God. Recently in America, there's been the rise of this thing people call secular humanism. Humanists believe that all there is man. So instead of God, they rely on man. They tend to look at science and nature as an evolutionary process. And rather than depending on any kind of providence from God, they believe in collective authority. Humanists tend to be progressive liberals who want big government because they see government as a way to provide things for themselves. It's not a terribly evil idea, it's just the natural outcome of their thought process. So from there, we go from worldviews. We're making a little transition in this next room. You could think of this as really still part of the worldview idea. We start to get into some of the science issues. We have a comparison of material evolution and intelligent design. And the point we're making in this comparison is evolutionists and creationists look at the same scientific evidence. There's no difference really. We look at things like geology and rock layers. An evolutionist would look at rock layers and say they relate to the history of the Earth over millions of years. A creationist looks at the rock layers and recognizes that they exist, of course, but they're really deposition by catastrophic events. They have no particular historical significance unless you put it in the context of something like the Bible that refers to Noah's flood and therefore can put it in some kind of historical chronology. And really we're making the point here about physics that if you think about it, everything in existence is based on chemistry, positive and negative charges, all arranged in different ways, kind of like a computer program. So in the beginning there had to be information and there had to be an information giver. And that's kind of a necessary prelude to getting into the universe area. We're going to be looking at the universe, we're going to be looking at life and biology, we're going to be looking at geology and the flood. We're trying to do a very consistent thing. We have this series of information panels in each room. You can see they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We always start with trying to deconstruct what scientists actually observe, because we often lose track of what is theory and what is actual truth and observation. So we're isolating for the universe what was observed. We're then going to the standard theory about the universe, which happens to be the Big Bang. So we're explaining how that relates to what's observed. Then we go to the Bible and we research all of the things that the Bible says about the universe and the stars and space, and we kind of lay out that information and start to build a case for how that points to a creationist idea of the universe. And finally, on these next couple of panels, we're looking at two of the major creationist physicists and their ideas about how the universe came about, what the nature of the universe is. So we have Dr. Russ Humphreys and his what's called a white hole cosmology, which is based on the Big Bang theory. And we have James Clerk Maxwell, who has an idea that the universe is really an electromagnetic phenomenon. So in the midst of all of this, we have video kiosks that explain things further. We have lots of physical representations of things, some of them simple, some of them pretty kind of cool. A lot of these things were designed by mainstream science centers around the country, like the St. Louis Science Center. So we have some pretty sophisticated content. Even an actual Mercury space capsule over here. One of the early capsules that was built by McDonnell Douglas and used as a model for the capsules that went into space. Okay, we've made a transition from the hall that's all about the universe, and now we're into the story of life here. And again, we use the same kind of strategy. We're trying to be consistent. So we're going into biology and we're looking at what scientists observe. And in this case, it takes a couple of panels to do that because there's more to know about life than there is about space. We go into what the evolution model of biology is. And again, that takes a little bit more time, and we move over to what the Bible says about living things. And finally, what the biblical model of life and biology is. So again, we're trying to get the visitor to see a consistent pattern so they have a way of looking at all of this information. In addition, we just have some fun stuff here. We have different kinds of panels about living things. We have the really cool alien from the X-Files. We have some hissing cockroaches when it's kind of warmer out. So kind of we give the people things to do, things to touch and feel, and they all kind of relate to the story that we're trying to present about creation. Again, more artifacts in this area, all about living things, and to give people an idea of the variety of life. And again, we have video kiosks that would be going on. Here we have an observation beehive, which is kind of neat in the summer when there are actually bees here. This time of year they tend to take off and hide because we're getting toward winter. And from the story of life, we move logically into geology. Because one of the key things we learn from geology is living things have died and been fossilized. So we had to have, before we could have geology, we had to have living things. Again, we follow the same pattern, what scientists observe, what the evolutionary theory about geology is, what the Bible says, and we feature Dr. Walt Brown's hydroplate theory that explains geological phenomenon on Earth. And again, we have videos that help illustrate those things. And we have a really good geological collection, rocks and minerals from around the world, and different illustrations of some geologic ideas. From geology, we move on to our hall about dinosaurs. And when we talk about dinosaurs from a creationist point of view, we also talk about dragons, because we believe that dinosaurs didn't live that long ago, and a lot of the stories we have about dragons are really dinosaurs. So the two things are related. We have a very nice T-Rex skull here. We have lots of different models of dinosaurs and information about them, and larger models and artifacts. From the dinosaurs and dragons area, we move over to the Bible. Since we've been talking about what the Bible says about all of these areas of science, we felt it was worthwhile to have a hall that explains the Bible somewhat. A great many people now have never read the Bible. They don't learn Bible in school anymore because it's not politically correct to do that. So it's helpful for us to have a little summary here. Our first summary explains what the Bible is, that it's primarily a book of history, and that explains a little bit of the story of the Bible. We have this chart called the 7 C's of History Timeline, which comes from Answers in Genesis. It explains all of the key events that have taken place in biblical history. We have artifacts from Jerusalem, artifacts from Egypt and Samaria and places like that. And we have this wonderfully long history timeline, which is really all of world history, with the Bible timeline superimposed in it, so that people can see that biblical history actually relates to secular history. They are real events that happened in time. After the Bible, we come to a hall about the founding of America. It says on our main sign there, the American Experiment in Biblical Government. Really, America was founded on biblical principles. We talked about Thomas Jefferson explaining how our rights are given to us by our Creator. And this is all very relevant now. This is the kind of thing that's happening in current events now. This whole conflict between conservatives and liberal progressives that's happening every day. It's not just something that happened 300 years ago, and it's all based on the Bible that happened thousands of years ago, but it still has an impact today. So these are all about the principles of liberty, based on a book called The 5,000-Year Leap. It says, the principles of liberty enabled a 5,000-year leap in human progress. America's founders searched both scripture and classical philosophy to determine the best ways to protect the liberty of mankind. Abandoning those principles is the greatest threat we face in the 21st century. Again, we're bringing all of these things about worldview to some relevance for today. Finally, we have a little hall here that we've never really been completely satisfied with, but it's our idea of presenting the gospel. We identified a man named Glenn Blair, who's a local resident, and when he passed away several years ago, he wrote a little booklet for his children and grandchildren giving his testimony so that they'd be encouraged, exhorted to learn about Jesus Christ and commit their lives as Christians. So we feature some of the pages from his little booklet on the walls here. We have one of the booklets hanging here, a portrait of Glenn. We also have a video kiosk that has some video testimonies. So eventually we'd like to do this kind of a thing in a bigger theater where people can sit down and relax and watch some of the testimonies of believers, both historically and current. So that kind of gives you a flavor of these 8 halls we're doing. We begin with worldviews, we go through sciences, we go through the Bible, we come through politics and current events, and finally a gospel presentation at the end. In addition to this, outside we have lots of fun kids activities. We have shooting water balloons at dinosaurs, we have a tennis ball trebuchet, we have a zip line ride. So we're trying to make the Science Center both informational and fun, something that people will come back to and experience many times.
Hello again. Thank you for going on this little tour with us. Bill and I are very excited about the possibility of you coming alongside us. We have a number of great ideas to enhance the exhibits we'd love to share with you as well. Here's a website link, contact information, and our schedule is very flexible to set up a personal meeting, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.